Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Topic UFO. Tonight we're going to be speaking to Betty and Amanda Ockerl, uh, who Betty has written a book entitled The Mysterious Lindsey Lights. And we're going to be talking to her about that. I believe this all started back in 2004, but we'll verify that with Betty and Amanda here in just a second. So, with no further ado, Betty and Amanda, are you out there?
We are here.
We're here.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for taking time out of your evening. I should mention that we had some outrageous thunderstorms come through here not more than a half an hour ago, and I was so worried we were going to lose electricity. So if for some reason everything goes dead, it's not because I hung up on you, okay? I think the worst is over, though, to be honest with you.
Good.
So, Betty, I'm going to start off with you. You've written a book called The Mysterious Lindsey Lights, correct?
That's right.
And this takes place where? Lindsey?
Yeah, the central part of the state of Wisconsin.
Okay.
And it's just a very small community out in the country. Just a bar and just a little small country grocery store, a park, and a meat packing place.
Wow.
And that's it. Yeah.
And from what I understand, you and your husband purchased a substantial amount of land, kind of out, I guess, in the middle of nowhere back in 1997, was it?
Yeah, that's right. 10 acres. Yep.
And what made you move out like that? Did you come from the city, or were you always country folk?
Oh, yeah, we were in the country all our life, and we just thought we wanted to get away from renting and buy our own place, and we did. We put an ad in the paper, and we found this nice little 10 acres in the woods, and it was just the right place for us. And yeah.
So everything was great. Life was good for what, maybe 7 years?
Yeah, from 97. We moved in here in 97. Yep. And everything was just normal as you go.
And then something happened. I take it.
Yeah, and that's something took us quite by surprise. And it was probably the furthest thing from our minds. And that's why I invited Amanda to come with me too tonight on the show, was because she was with me the very first time that we saw these unusual lights in the sky.
Lights in the sky. And Amanda, how old were you at that time?
I was 11, Rick. Yeah.
Do you
still remember it vividly.
You do? You still remember it very vividly, huh?
Yes, I do.
So take us back to this first time you saw these lights. What were you doing? Were you out on the porch? Were you driving? What was going on?
We were driving home from Marshfield. I was in the back seat, and my mom was, of course, driving, and she just had looked up at the sky and saw these lights, this formation. It was a V formation of lights hovering in the sky, and she had mentioned this to me, what is this? There's lights in the sky. And I had looked, and sure enough, they were just hovering there above us as we were driving down the road. And when I first saw them, of course, I didn't know what they were, where they had come from. But I knew that, we weren't just seeing, it was really there. We were both seeing the same thing. So
you weren't both hallucinating the same thing, right?
Exactly, okay. Right.
And then what?
Then I had actually jumped up front with my mom after I would say a minute had went by, and I had jumped up in the front seat because I was getting a little freaked out.
I bet.
From what I was looking at. And it was just remarkable what we were viewing in the sky. We had never seen anything like that before, and it was just astonishing.
Now, Betty, so here you are, you're driving your 11-year-old daughter around. You see this V formation up in the sky. What were your thoughts?
Well, I was trying to make sense of it first, and I'm thinking what type of aircraft would just hover there, and what type of aircraft would have anywhere from 8 to 10 white lights on it, and in a V formation, a sideways V. And because usually aircraft don't have just all white lights, and that many of them.
Right.
Right. So I'm thinking, okay, if that's aircraft, it's something I've never seen before, but it's hovering also. So, you know, my mind was just racing as to trying to make sense of what it was.
Now, let me ask you, before that moment when you saw that V formation, were you a UFO believer? Did it, you know, you kind of didn't matter either way? Were you totally ignorant about UFOs? What was your knowledge or feelings at that time about UFOs?
Right. Well, you know, I heard about them in my younger years, watched some sci-fi movies and whatnot, and watched a couple documentaries on UFO or alien abductions even when I was probably in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it was just something that I never really heard of before, and I thought it was really strange, and it kind of scared me. But then when I'm like 40 years old and I see this V formation, the only thing I could think of is this is not normal, and what if this could be a UFO? But I never had a background history of reading up on UFOs. It never crossed my mind.
Right.
Right. So it was just like, there it was. And the only thought you could think is, this isn't normal. So
Now, so you're driving down the road, and is this thing is hovering in one place, or it's hovering? Did it appear to be hovering above you and following you? What do you?
No, it was about, I'd say, like a quarter mile or half mile in front of us. It was big enough where it stretched across the road. From the one tree line to the other tree line. We have tall trees in this area, and it was just like dead center in the road. And for some reason, I don't know why, I'm coming down the road. It was dark, and I just happened to just gaze up a little higher off the road, and there were those lights sitting there. So we just continued to go forward towards it. Then it started shutting its lights off.
Yeah. Now, I mean, at that point, were you a little afraid, a little scared? Or
Yeah.
It just didn't dawn on you to be afraid?
Yeah, I wasn't freaked out where I was going to, you know, fight or flight type thing, but it struck me really as odd. So when I did tell Amanda, I think we've seen a UFO, you know, she's a little freaked out.
To say the least, yes.
So you say you're driving towards it, though, and the lights go out? Did they all go out at one time? Did one at a time?
Well, Amanda, why don't you say what you saw?
They had went off separately, one at a time. It was like bing, 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 and then until they were all gone. It was they did not go off like two at a time. They were all one at a time. And then it was gone, and it didn't reappear. It was just gone, and it was just like, where'd it go? You know.
Right.
Now, the lights that were on this thing, did they produce like a very white light? Were they a yellowish light? Do you remember that part of it?
It was more white.
A very white light, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
And as you saw these lights going out, were you able to tell for sure if this was one object or perhaps several objects, each with their own light? Or
Actually, it was probably just totally impossible to tell because it was dark. The sky was dark, and it just, you know, everything. I'm guessing it could have been connected. That's what I'm guessing,
right.
Because otherwise there would have been several lights. I mean, there could have been several lights hovering in a V formation. Come to think of it.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I mean, we do have a lot of reports of V-shaped craft, but of course back then, during that instant, I'm sure that's not what you were thinking about. You were just trying to understand what you were seeing.
Right. You don't think, is that all one object, or was there several of them together? And I talked to an Air Force young man that had purchased my book from this area, and he was, willing to talk to me about all this, and he looked at the illustrations I had in my book, and I told him the one on the cover is what we saw. I said, would that be military jets? And he's like, no. He said, for one thing, they do not fly in formation at night, and they're not over there like that. So he confirmed for me that it wasn't military, because that was the only thing I could have thought of was a formation of military jets, but he confirmed that they won't do that at night. So there you go.
So you continue your drive, lights go out, and do you finally meet up with this thing so that it would be, on top of you, so to say?
Never saw it again after that.
Really?
No.
So
Nope.
it just, lights turned out and that was it.
Right.
Once it was gone, it was gone.
It was gone.
Yep.
So is that where the story ends, or is that where the story begins?
That was the very beginning.
All right. Well, who's going to take us to chapter 2 here and tell us what happens next? Or at least give us a little clue of what happens next.
What was odd was that same night, after we saw this view formation in the sky, that same night as we were coming home, we had turned the corner onto our road, and right out on the horizon and in the front of us there by the tree line, there was this ball of light that was bouncing up and down, up and down, up and down on the tree line. It looked just like a bouncy ball. It was like a burning ball of like fire, and it was bouncing.
Oh, God.
And this was the same night, and so we're like, what the heck is that now?
Yeah, and that was to the west of us on the western horizon as we turned the corner, and that was probably within 10 minutes after we saw the V formation.
When you just said that, I just had a chill go through my spine. Because, let me tell you why. I did an interview last night with a couple of the eyewitnesses from the Blue Springs, Missouri activity that's going on right now. Shortly after we got done with the interview, about a half an hour, my phone rings, and it was the guy that I was just had interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, Rick, I hate to call you back so quickly, but I just was looking out my window, and a ball, it looked like the size of a big beach ball, and it looked like a round orb of fire rose from behind the fence in our backyard, went up through the trees, and as it went up through the trees, it illuminated the trees, continued to go up, and when it hit the low cloud line, the clouds lit up. And it sounds like what you just described, Amanda, was almost exactly what he was describing.
Wow.
So I'm sorry to jump in like that, but so Amanda, so you see this bouncing ball of fire on top of the tree line.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you thinking at that point?
Well, we had stopped on the road right before our driveway, and we were looking at it, my mom and I, and what else can you do? It was just it had our attention, and there really wasn't, it was just basically what was what was going through our minds. We just could not make out why this was happening, what it was, and whatever. It was very, very strange.
And then it stopped, and it just sat still, like it just sat down on the treetops. And so that was weird too, because it was like the thing was burning. So it's like it was almost like if it was right on the treetops. I mean, that's what it looked like from our view. And
now,
why
how far away, or what was the distance between yourself and the object?
Well, miles, because I'm thinking the horizon west of us, there's trees around here, but it was on the furthest out part of the horizon. It could have been anywhere from a mile to more beyond us. But it seemed like it was right on the treetops was what was really weird about it. And then when it stopped and just sat there, and then this tiny light just shot straight up in the sky from it. And we were just in awe. I mean...
Now, okay, back to this bouncing ball on the top of the trees, a mile or more away from you. Size-wise, if you're looking at the tree and this orb on top of it, can you estimate at all about what size this orb was?
Yeah, if you held your hand out, I would guess it was, what do you think, Amanda? If you held your hand out, it was smaller than a golf ball?
That seems about right.
Yeah, or a quarter size, something like that.
Okay,
It
so...
was definitely visible.
Yeah.
It was a ball of light.
It was big.
Yeah, it was...
I mean, it wasn't teeny tiny like a star.
No.
It was big.
And do you think that it was, that distance, it was the same distance as the trees? Was the diameter of the orb, smaller than the diameter of the tree? So it was, it wasn't as wide as a tree, or was it wider than one tree? Could you tell that?
Well, see, it's all wooded. It's a wooded tree line.
Mm.
It's a wooded tree line, so it was just bouncing across the tree line.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, it was like it wanted to just bounce like across the tree. It would go from left to right, bouncing back and forth. And that's what we saw when we came around the corner.
Okay, so it's bouncing, and then did it stop and shoot something up in the air?
It had stopped in midair.
Midair?
And a light had shot out of it.
Up, straight up.
Yeah.
A teeny tiny light now, about the size of a big star. And it left a trail. There was like a trail of light from the big ball as it shot up in the air. And the funny thing is, it just stopped. But it just stopped, and then it started moving to the right, real slow. And we watched it go, and then it stopped, and then it moved straight to the left, and it didn't blink. And I think it just like disappeared.
And from that point, it continued on its path to the right, and it was just gone. We had lost track of it. It was just gone.
So that all happened up to this point. It was all one day, right, or just a couple of hours?
Within about 10 minutes of the V formation, we saw that bouncing ball of light. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So in 10 minutes, all this happened.
Oh yeah, because it took us about 10 more minutes to get home after we saw the V formation. Yeah.
So by this time, you must be thoroughly freaked out. I would have to say. I know I would.
It was definitely a very eventful night.
So where do you want to go from here? Can you tell us more? Is there more to this story?
Well, the sightings just continued off and on, and what happened was, that evening, the thought was in my mind, burned into my mind, and I couldn't sleep. I couldn't get it out of my head. We told Amanda's dad when he got home from work what we saw. We were really, really excited about it. We didn't have a home computer, so I went to the library the next day and drug home a bunch of UFO literature. And Amanda and I looked through the pages, and we found what I think now could have been the Phoenix lights. I'm not really sure because I was unfamiliar with this whole thing, and even to this day, I'm still not that familiar with this whole thing. And we found this thing that looked like the V formation, and we just kind of looked at each other and decided that what we saw was what they consider a UFO. So I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to keep track of this because we had 2 sightings already. And within, a few weeks, I think it was, we had another sighting of a moon-like object. And that was just out here by our house, probably 150 feet away from us.
A moon
Yeah.
object.
Yes, and this thing was like a full moon, but it was at least 7 days or 10 days after the actual full moon, and it was completely round. So that happened. Yeah, that happened. Well, our first sighting was in mid-October, and this was the first week of November when we had the moon object right out here by our house. So now I'm beginning to think that they're targeting us.
Well, had you had not talked to anybody about it to see if anybody else had seen these? Did you? I take it you probably didn't report it to MUFON.
I didn't know about MUFON. I was
Right.
really, I was truly ignorant about this whole UFO thing. All I could do was just write it down on the calendar, and that's what I kept doing. Was every time we seen something, we wrote it down. And then I decided, I got to get out here and talk to people and try to find other people that maybe seen something so that we can collaborate this and hopefully figure out what it is we've been seeing.
And Amanda, let me ask you, did you were 11 years old at the time, did you tell any of your classmates at school that you and Mommy had seen a UFO?
I had been actually homeschooled at the time.
Oh.
I was homeschooled all throughout high school. I just graduated a couple weeks ago, actually.
Congratulations.
But so, of course, though, I still had friends who I had known from public school, and actually, no, I had not mentioned, not right away, of course. I kept it to myself. I didn't know what they would think because at the time I felt somewhat. They might think I was crazy or something.
Well, of course, yeah.
I kept quiet with that. I did not mention anything to my friends about what we were seeing.
But then she had sleepovers here also. She has a playhouse that fits probably 8 kids with their sleeping bags, and she didn't want to freak them out, and then, they wouldn't want to come and stay overnight or something if they thought we were seeing UFOs.
Yeah. Well, hey, that brings up a question. So you say you did go out, you wanted to start talking to people. Did you find anybody that could?
Yes, the lady that I had write my foreword for my book, she just popped out of the clear blue from a newspaper article, and she was at a book signing in the nearby city here, and had an article and wrote up in the paper where she mentioned that at some point or another she had seen some lights, and I thought, this is the person I want to talk to. So I just looked her name up in the phone book, and luckily I found her, and I told her, hey, we've been seeing some strange stuff down here. Can I talk to you about it? And we just hit it off really well, and she had a home computer, so she was able to look things up, and she'd copy them for me, different stuff. And she's the one that introduced me to MUFON, because she knew about MUFON because she was on the computer all the time. And I said, really? And she's like, yeah, you ought to report your sighting there. And so after a while, I did decide to get MUFON involved, but that was long after we've seen a total of a dozen different sightings.
Over how much time?
4 years.
4 years. And how many sightings did you say?
A dozen. A dozen. A dozen are in my book. Yes, and they were all different.
I just wish I've never got to see one myself.
I don't know.
And I talk to all these people that have these great sightings, and I just, my God, I need to spend more time outside, I guess, because so that's what, three a year. That's quite a bit.
On average, yeah. And like I said, well, it was probably after like 6 or 7 sightings when I got, or even probably more when I got MUFON involved. I had a whole log of it already, and I was in the process of thinking that I'm going to write a book about this because this is getting crazy. And when I did have MUFON come out, I told him I got it all here on the calendar. And he looks at me and he's like, I've never seen that before. Where people had a log of these sightings. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what made me do it. I just thought it was so unusual. what we were seeing that for some reason I just wanted to keep track of it.
Now, was MUFON able to help you at all, or I mean, it's really hard
Yeah.
when you don't see what the other
Right.
person saw.
I
What
know.
can you do? I mean,
Exactly.
there-
And we didn't have no pictures. We tried. We tried with the camcorder one night. We couldn't even get a decent picture of the moon. I don't know if it was the wrong setting or whatnot. It just wasn't working out. And so we scrapped that idea. So we tried with just a regular 35 millimeter camera before we had a digital camera, and that wasn't working out either. So it's just like we tried, but we failed at getting any pictures.
and so just so people know, you've produced several sketches in your book of are these of all the different things you saw, I guess, right?
Right. Every sighting, yes. I do have a sketch of every sighting that we had.
So your book basically goes through each sighting over that 4-year span?
Yes.
Wow. Wow,
Yes,
that's great.
Right, with the time and date of the sightings also. Like I said, I had it logged on the calendar, the times that it happened and whatnot. So
Now, your book did it come out just recently?
last August.
Last August, so almost a
Right.
year. If it's called, is it called The Mysterious Lindsey Lights or just Mysterious Lindsey Lights?
The
The
yes.
Mysterious Lindsey Lights. Okay.
Yes.
And have you gotten any feedback from the book?
Oh yeah. And it's really funny, Rick, that in this area, after my book had come out, and it was being sold down at the Lindsey Bar and Grill, they let me do a book signing down there. The people in the neighborhood actually were coming to me at the book signing with sketches of what they saw in this very same area.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That must be a neat feeling, right? Having
Well,
people come to you.
exactly, and that was one of my purposes for the book, was to get people to come forward and maybe say what they saw so that we wouldn't be the only ones.
Right. Well,
And-
and let me ask you, as the word got out and the book came out, did you have any negative situations?
Nothing really big. Nothing really big.
Just the weird looks you got?
Yeah, and the kind of the joking, what were you drinking? What were you smoking?
Exactly. That's just what happens every time. How about you, Amanda? Did your friends finally find out? I guess they must have, right?
They heard about it. The book's out now, and all the information and what we saw is out. And actually, yeah, some of my friends' parents had bought the book, so they know about it. And this is a topic that no one should be ashamed of speaking about.
Absolutely.
This is something that before I was leery about telling people. Now it's just I'm very open about it. I have no problem discussing this topic. It's something that is there. You can't ignore it. If you see it, it's something that just happened. It's not. It's really happening. You cannot just say, "Oh, it didn't happen." It happened, and it's amazing when other people can come to you and say, "Yes, I saw something as well." And you can be talking with people, and some people haven't seen anything, and they're willing to listen to you. Some people, they're sketchy about it, and they don't. They don't fully believe in what it. You have to see it to believe it yourself.
Exactly.
It is hard, as you mentioned, for someone to really grasp what you saw if they had not seen it for themselves.
Well, and I think you guys are lucky as well, because it seems over the last, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years, the whole topic has become much more accepted throughout the public, throughout the media, and that's good, because we really do need to be talking about this. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who have seen something and have never said anything.
Sure. Yep.
The MUFON files are filled with people who have made reports after 20 years. They've actually held on to it for 20 years and then finally wanted to tell somebody. So yeah, it's a very strange thing. You also get the religious viewpoint coming in. I've interviewed several people from a strong religious background that that feel these things are either demonic or in some way a negative spiritual type thing. So the the thoughts of what these things actually are, because we don't know yet, obviously, runs the gamut. Do you guys have any personal feelings as to what you think these things could be or why they're here?
Amanda, any thoughts?
Well, there's more than just our planet out there. Obviously, there's universes and there's galaxies and there's other planets and there's just it could go on and on. There has to be other types of life out there, and just knowing that, I mean, it could really be anything. I personally cannot put my finger on what it is. We just don't know, but it's definitely something that it was put here, just like we were put here.
Non-human?
It's it's definitely a different, yeah. Not human, but it was created, whatever it is, or they are, or whatever. It was
right.
They're here for a reason.
Right.
Everything has a purpose.
Exactly.
I agree.
Yes, and I do too. With my Bible background and whatnot, that was the first thing I did too. Was dig into my Bible to see is there anything that is said that would tell me that this isn't possible, and I couldn't find anything. And I've been a Bible student for over 30 years, and if anything, it makes me, the belief in God, for me, the belief in God even makes me believe more that there is something else besides us. He didn't make everything just for us, and we do need to kind of keep open to that. So, yeah.
So Betty, you said you have a pretty strong biblical background. Are you aware of or have knowledge of what they call the Nephilim?
Yes. And
I interviewed a couple of folks that wrote a book about that, and they feel very strongly that these things are the return of the Nephilim. I don't know enough about it to really even comment, but I was just wondering.
Well, I don't really either, and since this has all happened with getting the book published, of course, I joined Facebook and Twitter, and Facebook is really live with all different types of theories and whatnot going on about this whole topic. And, I really don't know. I'm undecided as far as anyone's theory about anything like that, especially like the Nephilim. I believe that they were just fallen angels, and I just thought that they were still bound in chains. I didn't know that they were released yet. So I mean, that was the way I studied the Bible. So, I just stay just to myself as far as I know what we saw, and I go by what other people say they see too, but as far as the theories go, I just don't know. I really, really don't know.
Let me ask you, do both of you, do you have a, say, renewed interest in UFOs? Do you find yourself, checking up on the UFO sites, trying to get more information on things, or does life just go on the same with you? Because a lot of times when people have a sighting, they get this urge just to gather more and more information.
Well, yeah, especially in the beginning while we were still having these sightings for the 4 years, it was crazy. Amanda, why don't you tell Rick what we did every night when this was all happening to us?
Every night, just about every night, we would take our car and we would back it out of our driveway and we would sit on the road across from our house and just wait.
Kind of like a drive-in movie.
And this became a routine, a nightly routine for us. We would just take the dog to Trixie, our dog, and we would all sit in the car and just look up at the sky and, small talk, wait, and just sit around and just just be patient, And sometimes we would see something, and other times no, it wouldn't happen. We would kind of go back in the house disappointed. We didn't see anything tonight, but there was always that need to just look.
Yeah.
We knew that we had been seeing things, and it was so active, and it really was just, it grabbed you. Just the sight.
I've heard that before. Once people have a sighting, there's usually no fear factor there. It's just the opposite. They want to see it again.
Right.
They want, so I don't know if that's just our basic curiosity, or, I think it has something to do with that. You just saw something that most people haven't, and as far as I'm concerned, you guys are very lucky to be been able to see that. I know that sounds kind of weird, but geez. So these things happened over 4 years. The book chronicles all 12 sightings. Now, has it stopped?
Well, other people in the area actually have mentioned that they see things, and we ourselves really haven't lately. We don't really sit on the road much anymore. I do make sure that if I hear jets fly at night, I go upstairs and watch out the window. I see flares, and I've learned through all this to be very careful what you're looking at. Don't try to mistake. I know what we saw was not a planet. It
most
wasn't
planets don't bounce.
Yeah, and they just, it was none of this that you can recognize.
Well, you say you saw flares. Now,
right.
Do you have a Air Force installation near you?
Yeah, Fort McCoy, I think, is about 50 miles south of us here.
Fort McCoy?
Yes, and I think there's another one, I can't recall the name now, that's kind of southeast of us. And I did call Fort McCoy when this was going on, and I asked them if they could just please tell me if they're doing maneuvers and what it is it would look like if I were to be watching them from the ground. And they just told me that their jets have red and white flashing lights. Their jets are easily recognizable. And because I described to them the V formation and other rows of lights that were lighting up and shutting off, and he just didn't say much.
Yeah, that's what they seem to do. They kind of clam up. And I think that's the frustrating part for most all of us ufologists, is that, the government has got to know about this, and the fact that they're keeping it from us is just makes my blood boil.
Yeah, right. Because it's like, what do they think? We can't handle it? I mean, there's people out there that are seeing things and having things happen to them, and they're handling it. It's okay. And I think the more that you would actually tell the people what's going on, the better they can relax about stuff. And but I don't know. But I do know what flares look like. And like I said, I'm really careful about what I'm looking at. I don't just run off and say, oh, UFO. I'm just very careful that it's not a plane. I observe it long enough to make sure I know what it is. And the flares, I know what they are. They shoot off. They light up little dots, and then they kind of fizzle out.
Right. And they don't produce the kind of lights you saw at that very first sighting, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And these lights were contained. The ones we saw, they didn't have any glare to them whatsoever, like a street light would.
Wow.
No, it was like contained in a circle, very perfectly. Yeah, and they were the size of stop-and-go lights.
Unbelievable. So let me ask you here. We're getting kind of down here on time, but I want to ask you, do you hope you see him again?
I would like to see them again.
Yeah,
It's been a very long time since we've seen anything. That last the last time we saw anything significant was the last sighting in the book, in the Mysterious Lindsey Lights. That was the last time we saw anything.
Yeah, of significance.
Yep.
Right.
So I personally wouldn't mind to see them again. I know they're out there because other people have seen things around this area.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about it and they say, yes, we've seen something, but I know they're there. We haven't seen them lately.
Mm-hmm.
What's the largest, the closest city? What's the main big city near you?
Marshfield.
No, Marshfield.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's a big city?
That's the biggest. It's what's the population, Amanda?
It's almost 19,000.
19,000?
And it has an airport, and it's just, and it's
Now, wait a minute here. I said big city. I was talking like 1 million, 2 million. 19,000.
Big city. Gee, the biggest city.
Like what?
You mean like Milwaukee?
Okay,
or,
Milwaukee. Okay.
Geez, and that's even a good distance away.
Boy,
we don't have any. Yeah, we don't have any big cities right here in central Wisconsin.
Central Wisconsin, huh?
No,
right.
The biggest would be Marshfield.
Yeah.
19,000.
Eau Claire, Wausau. They're all about the same, populate. It's not big, like Milwaukee would, that's down south of us.
Yeah. I was just up in Milwaukee last month. Beautiful.
Oh, wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Really love it up there. I just don't think I could handle the winters. Summers are beautiful, but I'd have to come back south during the winter.
Oh.
Well, listen, let's talk about where your book is available. The Mysterious Lindsey Lights by Betty Ockerl. Where can they find this book?
There's several sites online that are carrying the book. Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Target. There's several online bookstores, one in the UK, one in Australia.
Wow.
Booktopia, I believe, is one of them. But if they would just go online, it'll bring up several places they could get it online. Or if they're in the United States, I have been autographing copies and sending them out in the mail also by request.
Ooh.
Right. So, yeah.
I mean, what I think's so cool about this book is that you have 12 sightings in one book.
Right, from our family here, yes.
Yeah.
And it was right by our house. We watched a lot of it right here from our house.
Wow. I like I say, I'm still waiting to see one, and you guys got to see 12. Something's not fair there. But well, listen, it's just been an absolute pleasure to talk to both of you. Again, I hope your wish comes true, Amanda, and you do get to see him again. And you never know. Keep looking up in the sky, and something will reveal itself, I guess. Now, do you have? You must have computers at your house now, right? You have your personal computer. Yeah,
right. I'm on Facebook. Like I said, if anybody wants to Facebook me or email me, my email is in my information on Facebook. Or just if you type in my name in the search bar or type in the book's name, it'll take you to all the sites I'm in. So
okay, and I'll put those. I'll put your name and Facebook link and everything on the graphics here, so people can see that.
Sounds great.
Well, listen, Betty and Amanda, thank you so much. Again, great interview. I wish you the best of luck on this book. How's it been doing so far? Pretty good?
Oh, yeah. I really get a good response from this, and I've sold quite a few copies myself.
Excellent.
Yeah, so the neighborhoods, I mean, my husband sold one today. So he carries autographed copies with him when he goes running around the neighborhood. So.
Have you been asked to speak at any UFO conventions or anything?
No, I've had a few book signings, and I've done a few interviews, but I haven't got connected yet, I guess.
Yeah, hang out, you will.
It would be fun, definitely.
Yeah, I'm sure people would like to hear the story,
Yeah.
live and in person.
And
Yeah,
I would love to hear their stories too. I mean, that's just great when you have other people.
well, I'll tell you, I'm very new into this whole world of ufology. Um, it was funny that you brought up the Phoenix Lights because that was the first documentary I saw
Mhm.
about UFOs
Wow.
a few years ago, 3, 4 years ago, and it was that sighting that I just couldn't get enough information after that. I mean, I
Right.
just something compelled me, and that was a fascinating case.
Oh yeah, that's huge. That's amazing there. Oh, wow.
You know, you got the governor of the state who actually saw it. So, I
Yeah.
mean, what
Yeah.
else more do you want?
Exactly.
Amanda, were you going to say something? I think I may have
Oh,
interrupted you.
no, that's fine, Rick. I was just going to say that if people are in the surrounding area, the book is in bookstores
Oh, really?
around this area. Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, there's a book world down in Stevens Point or Rapids, I think it is. But I've been trying to get this book into bookstores more, and there are a few. I think a Barnes and Noble has one up here by us too. But yeah, it's online definitely. And like I said, I will mail out autographed copies in the United States. So
Great.
yeah.
And then if they wanted to get in touch with you, they can through Facebook.
Yep.
And we'll
Yep.
get that information up on the screen. And you know, I think you've done a great thing keeping track of all this and documenting it for other people to read. Um, a lot of times these things go by and don't get documented, and trying to go back is
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
hard.
very hard. Yeah.
I definitely give my mom props for writing the book
Ah,
and
there you
publishing it,
go.
successfully
you go.
publishing the book and getting the information out there, and just being brave enough to.
And yeah, and my good daughter too. She helped me out a lot, and without her, the book wouldn't have been published either. So it's just been
A real
family thing here.
mother-daughter team, UFO team.
Exactly.
Precisely.
That's
Yes.
great. Did you ever think that would be part of your life, being a UFO team
Never once.
before 2004 or whatever?
Never once crossed our mind.
All right, you guys. Listen, thanks again for doing the show.
Thanks for having us.
Not
Yes,
a problem.
thanks, Rick.
The Mysterious Lindsey Lights, Betty Ockerl. All right, guys. Thanks very much, and we'll keep in touch.
Sounds lovely.
You bet.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Yep. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, I tell you, how lucky can you be to have 12 sightings over a 4-year span? I just want to see one. That's all I want to do is see one. I'm a believer, don't get me wrong, but I just want to be able to see what some of these other people are seeing, because it's absolutely fascinating. Anyway, again, the name of the book was The Mysterious Lindsey Lights by Betty Ockerl. And you can look her up on Facebook and, let her know what you thought of the book after you read it. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Good night. The worst is over, though, to be honest with you.
Good. Good.
So, Betty, I'm going to start off with you. You've written a book called The Mysterious Lindsey Lights, correct?
That's right.
And this takes place where? Lindsey?
Yeah, the central part of the state of Wisconsin.
Okay.
And it's just a very small community out in the country. Just a bar and just a little small country grocery store, a park, and a meat packing place.
Wow.
And that's it. Yeah.
And from what I understand, you and your husband purchased a substantial amount of land, kind of out, I guess, in the middle of nowhere back in 1997, was it?
Yeah, that's right. 10 acres. Yep.
And what made you move out like that? Did you come from the city, or were you always country folk?
Oh, yeah, we were in the country all our life, and we just thought we wanted to get away from renting and buy our own place, and we did. We put an ad in the paper, and we found this nice little 10 acres in the woods, and it was just the right place for us. And yeah.
So everything was great. Life was good for what, maybe 7 years?
Yeah, from 97. We moved in here in 97. Yep. And everything was just normal. Normal as you go.
And then something happened.
See, from what I was looking at, and it was just remarkable what we were viewing in the sky. We had never seen anything like that before, and it was just astonishing.
Now, Betty, so here you are, you're driving your 11-year-old daughter around. You see this V formation up in the sky. What were your thoughts?
Well, I was trying to make sense of it first, and I'm thinking what type of aircraft would just hover there, and what type of aircraft would have anywhere from 8 to 10 white lights on it, and in a V formation, a sideways V. And because usually aircraft don't have just all white lights, and that many of them.
Right.
Right. So I'm thinking, okay, if that's aircraft, it's something I've never seen before, but it's hovering also. So, my mind was just racing as to trying to make sense of what it was.
Now, let me ask you, before that moment when you saw that V formation, were you a UFO believer? Did it, you kind of didn't matter either way? Were you totally ignorant about UFOs? What was your knowledge or feelings at that time about UFOs?
Right. Well, I heard about them in my younger years, watched some sci-fi movies and whatnot, and watched a couple documentaries on UFO or alien abductions even when I was probably in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was just something that I never really heard of before, and I thought it was...
Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Topic UFO. Tonight we're going to be speaking to Betty and Amanda Ockerl, who Betty has written a book entitled The Mysterious Lindsey Lights, and we're going to be talking to her about that. I believe this all started back in 2004, but we'll verify that with Betty and Amanda here in just a second. So, with no further ado, Betty and Amanda, are you out there?
We are here.
We're here.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for taking time out of your evening. I should mention that we had some outrageous thunderstorms come through here not more than a half an hour ago, and I was so worried we were going to lose electricity. So if for some reason everything goes dead, It's not because I hung up on you, okay? I think
That's really strange, and it kind of scared me. But then when I'm like 40 years old and I see this V formation, the only thing I could think of is this is not normal. And what if this could be a UFO? But I never had a background history of reading up on UFOs. It never crossed my mind.
right.
Right. So it was just like, there it was. And the only thought you could think is, this isn't normal. So
Now, so you're driving down the road, and is this thing is hovering in one place, or it's hovering? Did it appear to be hovering above you and following you? What do you?
no, it was about, I'd say, like a quarter mile or half mile in front of us. It was big enough where it stretched across the road from the one tree line to the other tree line. We have tall trees in this area, and it was just like dead center in the road. And for some reason, I don't know why, I'm coming down the road. It was dark, and I just happened to just gaze up a little higher off the road, and there were those lights sitting there. So we just continued to go forward towards it. Then it started shutting its lights off.
Yeah. Now, I mean, at that point, were you a little afraid, a little scared, or
Yeah.
it just didn't dawn on you to be afraid?
Yeah, I wasn't freaked out where I was going to, fight or flight type thing, but it struck me really as odd. So when I did tell Amanda, I think we've seen a UFO, she's a little freaked out.
To say the least, yes.
So you say you're driving towards it, though, and the lights go out? Did they all go out at one time? I take it.
Yeah, and that's something took us quite by surprise, and it was probably the furthest thing from our minds, and that's why I invited Amanda to come with me too tonight on the show, was because she was with me the very first time that we saw these unusual lights in the sky.
Lights in the sky. And Amanda,
Yeah.
how old were you at that time?
I was 11, Rick. Yeah. I
Do you still
remember it vividly.
You do. You still remember it very vividly, huh?
Yes, I do.
So take us back to this first time you saw these lights. What were you doing? Were you out on the porch? Were you driving? What was going on?
We were driving home from Marshfield. I was in the back seat, and my mom was, of course, driving, and she just had looked up at the sky and saw these lights, this formation. It was a V formation of lights hovering in the sky, and she had mentioned this to me. What is this? There's lights in the sky, and I had looked, and sure enough, they were just hovering there above us as we were driving down the road. And when I first saw them, of course, I didn't know what they were, where they had come from, but I knew that, we weren't just seeing, it was really there. We were both seeing the same thing. So
You weren't both hallucinating the same thing, right?
Exactly,
Okay.
right.
And then what?
Then I had actually jumped up front with my mom after a few, I would say a minute had went by, and I had jumped up in the front seat because I was getting a little freaked out.
I bet.
From